Good evening. Come on, if you guys want, come on up. We got lots of room and you can crowd in the front. Better viewing up front. Thank you very much for joining us tonight for this inaugural event for Shift Speaks, the summer-long speaker series that we're using to establish the foundation for the Shift Festival in October. My name is Christian Beckwith. I'm the director of Shift, and it's my honor to debut it with you here tonight. We are live streaming tonight's talk on Facebook, so please join me in welcoming our online viewers. And for their sakes and for the sakes of others here in the room tonight, please turn off your cell phones if you haven't done so already. I'd like to thank the National Museum of Wildlife Art, Pitch Engine, and the Murray Center, all of whom are helping us to develop Shift. I'd also like to thank the Reverend Mary Erickson of St. John's for making the chapel available to us tonight. And we are particularly grateful to Meg Daly, our coordinator for the Shift Speaks speaker series, she has put tonight's event together, and she is hard at work on the next 3 events, which we'll be holding over the course of the next few months in the lead up to the Shift Festival in October. The former Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans, International Environment, and Scientific Affairs, John Turner, will be speaking in the middle of next month. Entrepreneur and conservationist Story Clark will be speaking at the end of August. And on September 16th, Reverend Mary Erickson. So we're looking forward to all 3 of those. And Meg, thank you very much for all your diligence. So, big question, what is Shift? The easy answer is that Shift is an annual conservation event that was commissioned earlier this year by the Jackson Hole Travel and Tourism Board as part of their mission to develop Jackson's year-round economy. Their mandate was to create an event with a triple bottom line to increase tourism in October while also bringing value to our community and to the environment. But to properly answer the question of what Shift is, it became necessary to first determine what Shift should be. And that, in turn, depended in part on who we are as a community. It's tough to live here, maybe not right now in the middle of summer, but it always has been tough, particularly in winter. But the winters are so long. The growing seasons are short, the elevation is high, the weather is harsh, and our isolation makes it difficult to escape. Like the flora and fauna that inhabit this valley, the people who live here, you, are tenacious. Few of us move here for a job, fewer still stay for professional advantage. As a result, our community is both resourceful and deliberate. We're relatively rich and correspondingly philanthropic. We have great schools and great arts and amenities befitting communities much larger than our own. Best of all, we have a fantastic backyard that includes 2 national parks, 7 national protected areas, 5 lakes, 3 rivers. As you well know, it's absolutely spectacular here, and it's why most of us choose to live here. On many levels, we lead lives like all Americans, working and producing and consuming week after week, year after year, building out livelihoods that support our families and our lifestyles. But our commutes are special. On the way to work, we see the Tetons gracing the skyline with snow-covered tops. Snow King, seated in the lotus position, cradles our town in its lap. Sleeping Indian presides over our eastern perimeter in beneficent recline. Jackson Hole is a microcosm of the world, and we are society's children, living by its norms. But there are other cues to guide us, and we live closer to them than most. On days off, we hunt in the Gros Ventre, climb roots in the Tetons, fish the snake, watch the buffalo on Antelope Flats. When spring comes, we abide the hail and sleet and rain of May, knowing they'll hold the September wildfires at bay. We chart the recession of snow from the high peaks from year to year, looking for patterns. We gossip about the breeding habits of favorite grizzlies with familial pride. Like many of you, my wife and I are raising a family here. On picnics in Curtis Canyon, I watch my daughter run below the ghost forests on Jackson Peak, and I wonder, what can I do? When the whitebark pines die, the shade they provide disappears. The winter snow beneath them melts more quickly. Premature runoff raises the river's temperatures. The trout suffer, the fishermen suffer, so do the guide services. You can call it climate change if you'd like, but it doesn't change that fundamental question that I keep asking myself. What can I do? What kind of world am I going to give my daughter? Like most of you, my family, we live here for this environment, among this environment, upon this environment. The health of our forests and our rivers affects the vitality of our families and our economy. For all of us, it's personal, and it's connected. As isolated as this valley may feel, during a December blizzard, even our mountains are not high enough to shelter us from China's pollution and India's population. Around the world, local actions lead increasingly to global problems, or, if managed correctly, to global solutions. In order for it to succeed, SHIFT must be focused on these solutions. And it must also be an authentic expression of Jackson Hole, whose economic vitality and environmental quality are inextricably linked. As the crucible of conservation, Jackson has long been devoted to a stewardship of the lands we inhabit. Aldo Leopold defined conservation as a state of harmony between men and land. Living in such a powerful place, we become inclined to preserve this harmony, because we see so clearly what happens when it is upset. And that, in turn, is the opportunity that SHIFT represents, to develop solutions that preserve the balance we see all around us every day. Though SHIFT began just a few months ago, we're already working with local organizations from the Teton Science School to the Muri Center to Slow Foods of the Tetons on local actions that can become global solutions. And we invite you to join us. We're privileged to live in Jackson Hole, and with that privilege comes responsibility. If we manage it correctly, with your help, SHIFT will become our answer to that responsibility. SHIFT Speaks is helping us to develop our foundation for the October event by aligning provocative speakers with unexpected venues. We're trying to come at conservation from fresh angles. There's perhaps no better person to help us do this than our first speaker. A proud product, South Central LA. Juan Martinez is a National Geographic Emerging Explorer and the director of the Natural Leaders Network of the Children in Nature Network. His passion to empower individuals, particularly young ones, led him to direct the Sierra Club's first Environmental Justice Youth Leadership Academy in Los Angeles. An ambassador with the North Face, Juan addresses nature deficit disorders in today's youth, all part of his commitment to building healthier communities throughout our country. Though Juan moved to Jackson rather recently, his connection to the community runs deep. As a high school student, he received a 2-week scholarship to the Teton Science Schools that changed his life. He climbed the Grand with Conrad Anker in 2009, and in 2011 he served as the explorer in residence at the Muri Center. He's now embarking on the expedition of his life as he's engaged to Grand Teton National Park Ranger Vanessa Torres. Please join me in welcoming Juan Martinez.
So thank you guys for coming out tonight and being a part of this. I want to start off with that sense of gratitude for you guys taking the time out of your life to come out here and be a part of SHIFT. To Mary, thank you so much. Many times I've gone to browsing by, but never had I been in this beautiful building, over 100 years old, about 100 years old, as I just learned today. So really special, and I think that's the unique aspect that SHIFT is really going to bring to the community as we embark on this journey together. That when Christian first approached me about coming out and speaking on this, he was really gung-ho about conservation and how we were going to build a better tomorrow for our children. And my response to him was really it had to be a community-focused effort, and by opening the doors of St. John's Chapel and opening the doors of SHIFT to the world through the online stream, I think it's very unique in that aspect that SHIFT has the unique opportunity to do that. through all our different initiatives. So I have a presentation, and we're going to talk a little bit about my story and how I came to be, how I'm standing before you guys today. Then we'll talk a little bit about what I think is the opportunity that Jackson Hole has unique to itself as a community. And then we'll talk about some solutions that I've implemented across the country that I think could help and we can learn from together. And then we'll open it up for questions. And really, I want to have a conversation because that's what I really believe in is a community conversation and making this work. So I grew up in South Central in the shadow of the LA riots. I didn't think about the future much. By the age of 15, I stared down the barrel of a gun 2 times. In order to get out of detention, I had to join Eco Club. And that turned out to be the best decision of my life. I came home a different person. And now, I'm a bridge between nature and the streets. I'm just trying to teach kids that it's cool to play in the dirt. I'm Juan Martinez, and I love nature like I love my hood, and I'm a National Geographic Explorer. And what you see there is a car on fire. For many people, it might seem like a faraway place in a faraway land. Those are the 1992 riots in LA. If many of you recall that part of history, for me, it was as real as life ever approached itself. I was 6 years old at the time. And for me, growing up as an immigrant kid, being called the spick, being called a wetbag, being told to go back to my country, I was already pretty angry at the world. I felt like somehow life had dealt me the wrong cards. And that's right across the street from my apartment building at the time. All those buildings and markets are burned to the ground. I watched military tanks go down, drive down my street. I slept in a bathtub for 3 nights because my parents were afraid that bullets would go through the windows and hit us while we were sleeping. And somehow I really got this pent-up anger inside of me. And I realized that at the core of everything that I do, in retrospect, I did it for my family. And I wanted to protect my family so much that I would consider whatever way I could to make a dollar. And for me, the most immediate pathway to that was becoming a gang member. Because for me, it wasn't so much about the glorified lifestyle of a gang member. It was more about how they could put food on the table, protect their family, and at the end of the day, pay rent. And there weren't enough opportunities for me in front of me that I could see otherwise. But it wasn't always bad. That's a picture of my dad and my niece in our backyard garden that my mom broke through concrete to put her plants. And she grew everything from beans, aloe vera, chamomile, all these different things that I didn't realize what she was doing, but she was, in her own way, she was passing on her culture. And so at the age of 15, I found myself at a milestone. I ended up in detention. And in detention, they gave me an ultimatum. They said, either you stay in detention or you go to this thing called Eco Club. And when I was at Eco Club, I wasn't quick to jump on the opportunity to become a part of Eco Club, because from my perspective, Eco Club was this thing where the geeks and the dorks hung out. It was a place where I couldn't see myself fitting in. But I showed up the first day, and so I decided to take a chance and went. And the first day, my teacher, Miss Glenda Pepin, just gave me a box of seeds. And she said, pick a bag and let's go out to the garden. And in that garden what I decided to plant were jalapenos. Because I remembered my mom's garden. And I wanted to show my mom, because I thought I was so messed up at that time, I wanted to show my mom that I could do something right, that I could do one thing right. And so I decided to grow these jalapenos. And as I started to grow these jalapenos, I started to read up on pH balance and soil erosion, and then it hit me. They had tricked me. And but I didn't care. I wanted to make the best salsa for my mom. And so it kept coming day after day, and somewhere along the line, Ms. Glenda Pepin saw an opportunity within me, and she offered me to apply for a scholarship to the Teton Science schools now. Back then, it was only one school, 13 years ago. And I came. No, it's fine. And I came, and I got the scholarship. And for me to get a scholarship at the age of 15 within my community, it was a pretty big deal. The way I sold this opportunity to my parents was that it was a scholarship to further my education. It wasn't about the experience. It wasn't about going off to a far place, or that I was going to have fun. For me to sell to my parents that I was going to go away from home for 2 weeks, which was something that I had never done, that we would never do. The way that my parents saw that was an opportunity for me to further my education. So they supported me in that effort. And I remember flying, first off, getting on a plane for the first time in my life, coming into Salt Lake City. I mean, if you've ever taken that trip, you know what it's like. We took a bus that broke down 2 times on its way up here. And then we got here at night, so I couldn't really see, as we were driving through town, what we all know to be true. But I remember getting off that bus, and for the first time, air piercing my lungs. Turning up to the sky, and for the first time in my life, seeing more stars than I could count. Going to sleep without a siren or a helicopter over my head. Going to sleep in my own bed. Which back home, my sisters took the bed, and I would take the floor. And the next morning I wake up, and these things are staring at me. And somehow, within all that, I found enough of my heart and soul in these mountains, and back in South Central LA with my family, to figure out that there was some kind of connection. To finally figure out that I made sense, that I had value to this universe, that my life was significant. And I decided that this was going to be my effort to build a bridge between those two universes that seem so different but yet so parallel at the same time. Because what I realized was that it's out there where the trees don't really look at your skin color. They're still going to quake, and you're going to be able to learn about all the different flora and fauna out there. The river doesn't see your income level. You can still go drink from it and play. And the mosquitoes really don't care who you are. They're still going to do their thing. So the new age of exploration, I think, is something that I'm here to talk about. And one of the reasons why I believe National Geographic chose me as an explorer to join the ranks of Jane Goodall, Bob Ballard, the Crackhead brothers that reside here in Jackson. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but yeah.
In 1888, a club was formed with a mission to explore. Today, that spirit lives on in a new generation of National Geographic explorers. Innovative thinkers who redefine exploration. Living the mission and making the world a better place.
So what I've realized in my conversations with National Geographic and why they ended up choosing me as one of the explorers was that it's a 150-year-old organization. They just celebrated their 150 years old, and there's a great sense of exploration that we are getting to the highest peaks, and we're getting to the bottom of the seafloor, and we're going as far as we ever imagined into the outer universe. But the conversation really lies in how do we translate everything that we're doing to make meaningful community impact. So a snapshot of the issue that I work on is related around what Richard Louv, author of The Last Child in the Woods, coined a phrase called nature deficit disorder. And it's the theory that as generations go on, the connection with the natural world grows wide. And when that connection grows wider and wider, there are more health, emotional, psychological challenges that are faced with that society. And he will be the first person to say that that is not a medical term in any way, sense, or shape, or form, but it's more of a term he used to describe society in this aspect. The Surgeon General has given us the first warning to our generation, the millennial generation, that if we don't curb our habits of our lifestyle, we are on the pathway to be the first generation to successfully reduce lifetime expectancy. So there's over 7 billion people on Earth as of this moment. And out of those 7 billion people, over 50% of those people now live within 10 miles of an urban center. But here's an interesting fact that I found out, that if you were to put 7 billion people shoulder to shoulder with each other, they could all fit within the city of LA. So it's not necessarily a conversation around whether we're running out of natural resources. It's how we're managing those natural resources and how we're developing renewable energy and technology to keep the resources that we do have intact going. A quick snapshot of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A lot of the things that I'd said previously probably don't apply to Jackson Hole. And I think that's where the opportunity really lies. There's a little over 9,000 people that live in the town of Jackson year-round. Out of that 9,000, 25%, over 25% of those are Latino. I know that shocked me too when I heard it. Maybe not you guys because you've been living here. But our unemployment rate is about 2%, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the United States. There's over 200 nonprofits based out of Jackson, and over 3 million visitors come through our town every year. So I think that's where the opportunity really lies, and we have an amazing array of organizations that are already working on this, from the Murray Center, the legacy of the Murrays, who helped establish the Arch National Wildlife Refuge, and I've been working with them to develop that conversation of conservation. The Teton Science Schools in their first-class programs within the United States, they're setting the bar for the rest of the country and the rest of the world. To our public land agencies that are working with programs like Teton 10 the young stewards and leaders that's run out of the National Park Service, the Children's Forest that's close to here. And there's art, music, everything you can imagine that this small town really holds. So my challenge is really built around this idea that what if the 9,000 people really developed a significant relationship with their natural environment? The what if that if we all committed within that all these different initiatives and campaigns that are working together to really put a concerted effort and establish some metrics and goals. And that's, I think, the beauty about Shift Jackson Hole, that it's not necessarily trying to be a campaign or an initiative. It's trying to be, what I think is and Christian and I have talked about this, is to celebrate that synergy that's happening there, to celebrate the conversation that's happening there, and to invite the world to come and help us build it. So why I do it. I established, Rich Louv and I've worked closely together. I run his youth leadership development program throughout the country and worldwide. And what the Children in Nature Network has established, so out of writing his book, he co-founded the Children in Nature Network. And the Children in Nature Network is really a collaborative of networks and individuals and organizations that say, we want to step a little bit away from sounding the bell of climate change, global carbon. If we don't hit 350 parts per million of our carbon monoxide spill, that we're headed towards a dark day. What Children in Nature Network, I think, really focuses on is something that Rich has said, put very well in a point, is Dr. King didn't say he had a nightmare. Dr. King said he had a dream. And we really see our role in trying to bring this conversation to build what that dream looks like, to build what that tangible thing people can feel and look towards to. Because I've gone across the country and I've talked to kids as young as 8 and as old as 55. And what everybody keeps on bringing up is this dire sense of defeat, that we are headed towards a dark age. What I really want to bring is celebrate that message of our connection with the natural world, that I don't think is done often enough or enough of to really do that. Because I believe that if you make that connection, the rest of it just kind of flows out of it, whether that's through hunting and fishing, ATVs, whether it's camping, backpacking, or rock climbing, whatever that form of connecting with the outdoors is, I think it's a powerful message to be put out there. So with the Natural Leaders Network, the Youth Leadership Development Program of the Children in Nature Network, we've established young leaders throughout the United States. With the Children in Nature Network, we touch over 3 million kids under the age of 18 every year. Not only in all 50 states of the United States, but in 3 different countries. We are the leading organization in putting out research and news that comes out of the issue. So I am not a scientist by trade, but I will point you to that website where all the scientists live. And I do it for adventure. You can't do it without fun. In 2009, the North Face asked me to come out and be a guest speaker for them at the Outdoor Retailer Show. In that show, I was looking at this picture. Before the show, I was looking at this picture of the Grand Teton. And at that point, I still was not living here. And from behind me comes this tall, slanky guy. And we start just talking about the Teton and what it meant to him and his friends and his family, and I started talking about the Teton and what it meant to me, very similar to how I told my story earlier. And out of the tip of my tongue, I say, I'm gonna climb that mountain one day. And he looks over at me and says, I'm going in 3 weeks. You want to go? And there's always 1,000 excuses you can say to not do something. And I was trying to come up with some of them, and he didn't have any of that. So we go over to Steve Rendell. He pulls me by the sleeve, and we walk over to Steve Rendell, who was the president of the North Face at the time. And I knew who Steve was, but I still didn't know who this guy was. And he tells Steve, hey, I want to go climb the Grand Teton with Juan. Do you think you can help him out with some gear and a ticket? And this is the president of a multi-million-dollar company, so he says, yeah. And so I'm trying to figure out who this guy is. And they were showing a trailer for a movie, and they were showing the movie at that time in a theater, and it was called oh man, I'm blanking. The Greatest Dream. The Greatest Dream, and it's a story about how there's a debate about who climbed Everest for the first time, and whether it was Shallard or somebody else. And it was a story about this guy who went up and found the body and solved the mystery about Everest and who climbed Everest. And as they're describing the movie and we're all sitting down, they ask Conrad Anker to stand up. And it happens to be this guy who I just agreed to go with in 3 weeks to climb the Teton. So it really, I think what that story really says is, you know, in September 9th, 2009, we summited the Grand with Conrad Anker, one of the living legends of alpine climbing in the world. He was just rated by ESPN, I think, like one of the top 7 athletes in the world. All that aside, it was that conversation of us and just how much this mountain meant to us back home and wherever we lived that brought that together. So I do it for adventure. I do it to empower other individuals. And I think at the end of the day, the reason why I was doing a lot of the bad stuff back in my early days was my family. And a lot of the reason why I keep doing a lot of the good stuff I do today is my family. And that's my family during the National Geographic shoot, which you saw a couple of clips of today. And my only condition to the crew when they came out was that they had they had to go to the garden and they had to go have a meal with my family. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me for my mom to have National Geographic filming her garden. It was pretty rocking, and it was one of those few things you can do as a son to repay something. And in September, I'll be taking my vows with my lovely fiance here in the Grand Tetons. And what I've come to realize about family is that it goes beyond those who I really hold close to my heart. It's going to be my future wife, and it's going to be my mom and dad and my sisters forever. But if I'm going to be successful at pouring my heart and soul into a movement, into a passion, I have to consider every single one of you here that wants to join that cause part of my family. And it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you grow up in a community where you're pushed against that. And so I'll end it with a quote from Majora Carter, who's one of my role models and friends. We might have come here from very different very, very different stations in life, but believe me, we all share one incredible, powerful thing. We have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Thank you.
Can you stay there?
Yeah.
So for those of you who can stay, we're going to have questions from the audience. And as you can tell, our mics don't actually amplify the sound in here, but it'll be for our live stream. So does anybody have a question or something they want to say to Juan? Conversation to start. So if you can hold this sort of close to your mouth.
I'm wondering who sponsored your scholarship up here.
I know who it is. It was Mike Hoover of the Hoover family, and he was married to Beverly Johnson at the time, and they live out of Kelly. And Beverly Johnson and Mike are world-renowned cinematographers and adventure filmmakers. And Beverly and Mike were down in the LA riots, and they were filming kids. They were just filming everything that was going on, and they ran into a couple of kids from South Central, and they asked them, had they ever been outside of South Central or to anywhere like the Grand Tetons? And obviously the answer was no. And Beverly had always wanted to really establish something to get kids on a scholarship basis. But before she did that, she could do that, she passed away in a helicopter heli-skiing accident. And so Mike went on and established the scholarship on her behalf. And that's how I ended up coming up here through Mike and the Teton Science School's efforts to put that scholarship program together.
Anyone else?
How do you define nature deficit disorder, and how do you address it?
So I define nature deficit disorder as the lack of connection with the natural world on a constant basis. And for me, it's a very different issue than just having a one-time experience. And I think the conversation now in general around the conservation movement is revolving around this. There's so many good organizations out there that take kids outside and will give them a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But I think the real benefit and the cultivation of that relationship is the key to address curbing nature deficit disorder. So it goes long beyond just having that one-time experience in the park or having that one hiking experience or going fishing that one time, to really developing what that means in their own community, in their own life, and building advocates within the community to speak about those experiences. And I think one of the perfect examples is the Young Stewards and Leaders program that actually takes the kids outside, but not only does that, it builds a curriculum, it builds a mentorship, sustainable program, and goes beyond just that one-time experience. And we need more of that. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. You want to get your voice on the mic?
Hey, thanks so much for sharing your story. I'm curious. We're, at least most of us, very privileged to live here. Really happy you're living here. What do you think all of us in this room should be doing? What's our responsibility? What can we do to make a difference on all of this stuff?
Yeah, I think the responsibility can only go so far as the responsibility that you want to take on. And for each one of us, it's going to be different. For me, it happens to be this connecting with the outdoors. But I think if I can ask you to do one thing, if you can take away one thing from this conversation, is to really look at yourself as a mentor to another young person. Because there was nothing as powerful as an opportunity. And for me, an opportunity came through that Eco Club and having that scholarship. But for you, if it's through accounting, if it's through pilot training, if it's through scuba diving, if it's through medical internships or whatever it is that you can see yourself providing as and really playing the role of a mentor, and going beyond just the specific boundaries that that are set upon yourself, that you can only talk about certain things. For me, my mentors went beyond just asking me how I felt when I went outside to the outdoors. They asked me about my family. And they asked me about what my life goals were. And so those are the kind of mentors that I think we need more of. So if you can see yourself as one of those, please don't hesitate to step up to the plate. And obviously there's just an amount of over 200 nonprofit organizations that are based out of here. Everything from Sierra Club to MPCA to the Grand Teton Foundation. If you can get involved with one of those, please do so. And last, but certainly not least, is coming out and supporting and showing the Chamber of Commerce that things like Shift Jackson Hole can happen more and more of, so that we can, in October when we start to launch this thing, it can really bring the conversation to a catalyst. Thank you for that question.
Hi, I just had a question about your efforts in South Central LA, and I just wondered what your connections are there with the schools, and is it kids of all ages, or are you starting with just like little guys and bringing them close to nature, or is there any of that kind of activity going on?
Yeah, so I mean, I can name off a bunch of different organizations that work with them, and primarily what I do is I work with the rising young leaders that need those mentors and need that leadership and professional development, from everything from how to stand in public and tell your personal story to writing grants and getting funding for your organization. So I primarily deal with that professional development, and I look at young leaders between the ages of 18 to 29. However, what we found between that bracket is that that's kind of the sweet spot, because they're working with younger kids and they're also starting off as young professionals to really establish themselves and their skill set to affect at the higher level. And I mean, we have young leaders that do everything from urban gardening to being school teachers. Carson High School was just up here at the Murray Center this past week as part of the Murray Kids program. There's a crew from Summer Search and Teton Science Schools that's here that I've been working with and talking with. And I think for me, it's more about that professional development and having some young rising star know that they fit in somewhere and have a source of resources and network and support.
Other folks? Paul? It's so funny, you're talking to Mike and nothing happens.
Kind of building on Trevor's question, you pointed out that we have 3 million visitors in a county of 18,000 people. Are we doing enough to lead by our example? People are coming here open to a message on nature, a message on wildlife. Are we doing enough to send them home with a conservation message by our example?
I wouldn't be too hard on ourselves, and you know, I'm starting to consider myself a part of this community. I wouldn't be too hard. It's 3 million people. It's a lot of people. But I think that there is already some great initiatives on board that need the support of the community to keep going forward, that need the funding support, not only from the local community, but also at the national scope. I really believe that within this community, there's a nugget of a golden nugget in there, that there's a program in there that really combines all of these different partnerships, everything from an NPS academy that encourages diverse students from different backgrounds to come in and consider career paths within the National Park Service, to going out and fly fishing and learning how to fly fish. There's a formula in there with all these different variables that are playing their part, but I think the formula is something that I'm really excited about figuring out. And what I really see the opportunity for Shift, again, Jackson Hole, is to figure out that formula for a national example of how this can work, because we have it all here. We have the impact, we have the resources, we have the amazing passion of individual community members to the passion of organizations. There's something here that we can really establish and lead the way in. Thank you for that question.
What have you found that has worked in getting kids outside and interested and engaged?
Getting kids outside and engaged is kind of an easy part. That's the easy part. Getting them excited and getting them to be kids and play in the mud and do those kind of things is I really believe, the easy part. And there's great examples of great organizations that are doing that out there. But I think it's time for us to go beyond that conversation of we're getting kids outside, and that's great. And for a long time, I'm guilty of this too. We're getting kids outside, and that's great. What I see the challenge is really what happens when they go back home. How do we translate that experience when they go back home? Even here in Jackson Hole, how does that experience really affect how they interact with their school system, with their local park, with their family? So I haven't seen an example of that really working. There's so many other examples that go the route of education and sports and things like that. But within the context of conservation is really one that I don't think has been really identified in. And the conversation of conservation is evolving, and that's a mouthful. Because conservation by nature dictates that we have to conserve and keep out. And really that's only going to get us so far in terms of how a community feels empowered in ownership of a certain place when they can't be a part of that place. And so we have to go beyond conservation and look at creating green space, and beyond creating green space, creating a relationship with that green space.
Anyone else?
It doesn't work, does it?
Well, it's for our live streaming. You're live on TV.
Okay, well, hello, Indiana, how you doing? Hey, I'm one of the 3 million visitors come through here, and your commitment to outside conservation is loud and clear, to coming from a person that comes from a GM town of 20,000 jobs that are now gone. We have empty fields. But what I want to say is, you know, the hybrid parking, the bike hikes, and I see them being used, occupied every day. You know, it's a beautiful thing. How do you change government perception? Because I come from a big city. I know our mayor back in Indiana, and I like green space. I want to see raspberries. I want to see wildflowers. I want to see trees, native trees planted in places where they just grow grass. How do you approach the government, the local government, to maybe consider something like this? And also, I go to church. We bought it old school. We pulled up the blacktop, and we started planting gardens.
Cool.
And we're trying to get the children in the community engaged. And you know, how can, you know, I wrote down in my journal, flowers bring in butterflies. And you know, do you just start small and be persistent? Got any comments or thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we need those small victories and those stories of people going beyond just the limitations that government instills upon a certain place. There's one example is the guerrilla farms that are happening in South Central LA, where people are throwing seed pods out of their cars or growing gardens within freeway, wasted away green space. Because there's only, I think at the same time, there's such a built-in system within government that there's only so much they can do with limited amount of resources. So when stories like yours of ripping off the top come about, I think it's a pretty clear message that this is what the people want. And Cesar Chavez once said, un derecho ejercido no es un derecho perdido. Un derecho no ejercido es un derecho perdido. And a right not exercised is a right lost. And so when you really flex your muscle as a voting town and say, we want more green space, but not only say that and say, these are the amount of voters that are saying that are saying, these are how many registered voters we have with this coalition that want this change. Now, will you sit down and speak with us about that? Sometimes it's tough I think for government, we kind of have to nudge them a little bit and say, hey, this is the kind of stuff we need to get done. Hence why within the Children in Nature Network, what I really focus on is really handing over grassroots leadership skills to these young leaders, so that not only are they saying, come on kids and communities, let's get outside, but once they go back to the community, say, okay, let's talk about the challenges and let's talk about the solutions that you see here. Let's put them down on paper and let's go to City Hall and say, this is our voice. I think and you're very different, you're within this small town context. I think it's very particular and very, very unique in itself, but coming from a big city and knowing what LA is like and knowing what Detroit, I'm guessing, no? Anderson, Indiana, okay. Anderson, Indiana is like, it's those grassroots tactics seem to often work with the political mindset.
Hi, Juan. Congratulations on your engagement.
Thank you.
Are you familiar with the old Fresh Air program that took inner city youth into the countryside?
Old Fresh Air?
Yeah.
No,
it's called the
not.
Fresh Air program. That's something I was involved in as a child back in Pennsylvania, and we hosted kids from the inner city. And I was wondering whatever happened to that program. It's defunct to my knowledge, but it was long before Louvre came on the scene and wrote the book and identified nature deficit disorder.
Yeah.
That's what that program was getting at. I'm wondering if maybe that's worth examining and seeing what happened to that program, what the results were.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great programs out there that are doing amazing work, and again, I'm guilty of this. When I first started, I wasn't putting the metrics down. I wasn't saying, not only are we getting these kids outside, we can get 1,000 kids outside, but what does that mean? What is that tangible? How many of those kids are graduating high school? How many of those kids are increasing their math and science scores? And how many of those kids are off pharmaceuticals or on pharmaceuticals? And what does this connection with the natural world mean? And when you combine the qualitative with the quantitative, I think it's a powerful message. So it saddens me when I hear that there's great organizations and projects that go on and don't make it, but and again, Jackson Hole is a very unique position. We have a very supportive community of all these initiatives, but the rest of the country is very competitive to come up for these funds for nonprofits, and so I don't know, but it'd definitely be worth looking into.
Can somebody tell me what time it is? 8:06. So I think just to be respectful of people's time, we're going to take one more question, comment from Nancy.
I was very moved when you were describing going into nature and not feeling judged, which of course is not the case in the human population. And it seems as though what I hear you saying is that you're sort of transcending what I've always seen as kind of a division between people who want to do good in the world, and they either work in social justice and try to, break down some of the things that, humans do that aren't so kind.
Yeah.
Or they work in environmental protection, environmental causes. it seems like you're saying we need to break that barrier down.
Yeah.
That these things are very connected. And
Yeah.
I'd love to hear how that works in you.
Yeah. Oh man, that's an awesome question. Thank you, Nancy. I mean, my story goes. I've only been working on this issue full time for the last 5 years, so relatively new to me. For a long time, I was working in a fair housing initiative program down in LA, which dealt with discrimination and housing issues and fighting for families that were losing their homes due to foreclosures, and getting these communities together to advocate on specific laws and initiatives within the state of California. And that's really where I learned the power of empowering leaders. And when I justify this to myself, why I do what I do, and I am so passionate about this, is that really I'm empowering leaders within communities. That the skill set that they gain from going out and playing in the backcountry and going fishing, and those memories that they will build there will make them better leaders. That by being a part of initiatives that look at social justice issues and fight for those issues will make them better leaders within their community. And that's really, I think, at the helm of what I do, I feel an obligation to do, because people believed in me to be a leader. And until I saw that within myself, I didn't really believe that I could create change for a positive impact within my community. So and you're very right. When I speak about this, there is this barrier of social issues, and I think we need to go beyond that barrier and really talk about the underlying of everything that we need to do together. That social justice issues are very, very much a critical part of the conversation that we're having today, and that within the social justice realm, they see our issue as a critical part of the conversation as well. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Maybe we can, did you want to say anything in closing, Christian?
Thank you, Juan.
Yeah, maybe we can thank Juan.
Thank you.
And thank you, Meg, for pulling this all together.
Yeah, Meg.
So our next speaker will be mid-August.
Yes. And we're 90-ish% sure it will be John Turner.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for